The best way to predict the future is to create it. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders prepare for the future of work now. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's go.
All right, so here we go. The first official full-length episode of our Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks 8. I'm Jason Cochran, the adaptive futurist at HumanWorks 8, and I'm going to be your host today. As a reminder, the Humanscape podcast exists to help business leaders like you prepare for the future of work now. And what better way to start a conversation about the future of work than by bringing up the past? Check this out. Predictions on what the future of work will look like have been made for a long time. In fact, I found stuff going all the way back into the 1960s in major publications across the country that had to do with predictions on the future of work. Listen to these two that I was able to find. Again, these are from the 1960s. The first one is from Time magazine in 1966. Here's the prediction. Begin quote. By the year 2000, machines will be producing so much that everyone in the U.S. will, in effect, be independently wealthy. With government benefits, even non-working families will have, by one estimate, an annual income of $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Now, that's in 1966 dollars. And so how to use leisure meaningfully will be a major problem. End quote. So before we get to the second prediction, in case you're wondering, what is $40,000 annual income in the 60s? What's the equivalent of that now in 2024? It's $420,000 a year in annual income. I don't think we're quite there yet, but you can see in the prediction going all the way back to 1966 that there is this concept of universal basic income, that we may get to a point where humans are working less, machines are working more, and that may create abundance for others. Here's the second prediction on the future of work. This is from the New York Times in 1967. Begin quote. By the year 2000, people will work no more than 4 days a week and less than 8 hours a day. With legal holidays and long vacations, this could result in an annual working period of 147 days on and 218 days off. End quote. So let's put that one in perspective. The average American takes 17 paid days off per year, in addition to the 11 federal holidays, along with weekends. That comes out to 132 days off each year for the average American. That is 86 fewer days off from this prediction of 218. So who knows? Maybe we'll get there one day as well when it comes to the amount of time that we take off. But what's cool about this is that even though these two predictions have not yet come to pass, I think you'd probably agree it's kind of easy for us to start envisioning a future where this might actually happen, where we have a 4-day work week and possibly universal basic income for many people, especially with the proliferation of artificial intelligence. And to that end, I'm thrilled to welcome our very first guest on Humanscape, Dave Kapic, the COO of Stella & Chewy's. As the Chief Operations Officer at Stella & Chewy's, Dave drives the company's vision by providing strategic leadership in manufacturing, supply chain, procurement, and food safety and quality. Known for his people-focused approach, Dave has a proven track record of delivering positive results and nurturing talent within his teams, leading to significant margin improvements and operational streamlining. Before joining Stella & Chewy's, Dave held key executive leadership roles at renowned companies like Johnsonville and Schreiber Foods, where he spearheaded transformative initiatives contributing to substantial revenue growth and operational efficiencies. So, Dave, thank you so much for being with us today and talking about these important things. Lots of exciting stuff going on, but let's start with an easy question, and that is, how did you get interested in people and culture?
Personally, I think it's an evolution for leaders. And, a little side story on me, growing up, school wasn't always easy for me, and I didn't know why. And I actually say, I'm glad I didn't know why. And so I came to find out I actually had dyslexia. And so And I didn't know it when I was in school growing up and high school and that kind of stuff. And I say I'm glad I didn't, because I would have thought of it as a handicap. But instead, today I think about it as a gift. And so my affirmation came through leadership and being very involved. I was involved in sports. I was class president, was always super involved. But I think the leadership aspect, you learn at a young age, and leadership is all about people and learning to value people. It's not about what you can do, but it's about how you can help to remove barriers and put other people in a position to be successful. And so I learned that at a young age, and that's, I think, been the cornerstone of, playing to my strengths that I work to develop. And if I have a chance to coach ambitious young people that want to be a leader someday, my advice is always get involved. Get involved in philanthropics, nonprofits, in clubs or school, in a position where there is really no authority, and it's all done through influence. Because if you can learn to influence people in a leadership position rather than do it all yourself, then later in life, when you do have authority through a position in a professional environment, you will be much more successful in helping to lead others. And so I guess when you ask, where did my interest in people or trying to help people, it came from, growing and developing as a leader myself from a young age.
That's really interesting, Dave. And it's so tried and true. There have been so many leaders I've spoken with where coaching was an element of growing up, whether it was in sports or some other avenue, that coaching was really the thing that they went through. Either they were a coach or they were being coached. And that was like the key ingredient that allowed them to then become what I love that Liz Wiseman calls it, a multiplier, a leader that really, as you put it, removes those boundaries and obstacles. And instead of trying to come up with the solutions for everybody, lets everyone play to their strengths and multiplies and magnifies the brilliance in each one of them. And so I guess a good follow-up question for you on that, Dave, is how the heck do you do that in an organization the size of Stella and Chewy's? Because I know we've got some listeners that are like, oh yeah, I've got a team of 20, maybe 50 total staff. How do you do that in an organization that may have hundreds or thousands of team members?
One of the things that's interesting is Stella and Chewy's, for those who don't know who Stella and Chewy's is, Stella and Chewy's is premium pet food. We primarily make dog and cat food. Our founder, Marie Moody, actually started the whole freeze-dried category. So the raw pet food. So we're premium, and I would tell you that we make the very best high-quality pet food, and it's an honor to be associated with the brand and to be responsible for making sure that we're putting the best product out in the marketplace. But that said, Stella and Chewy's is one of the smallest companies I've worked. It's actually interesting. I've worked my way down in size, but my scope and responsibilities over the years have grown. I spent the first 10 years of my career working at General Mills, and then I joined a smaller company at the time named Schreiber Foods, which is one of the largest privately held dairy companies in the world, making primarily processed cheese, natural cheese, cream cheese, and yogurt. 9 out of 10 cheeseburgers in the U.S. has their cheese on it. And so when I started at Schreiber back in 98, it was like under $1 billion. And when I left, it was $6.5, $7 billion. Today is probably over 10. And then I worked for Johnsonville. It's a $1.4 billion company. And Stella and Chewy is about a $320 million company. So I think size is a little bit relative. I think it really has more to do with how do you go and focus on culture and people if you're a leader. Because if you can go and help others to be successful, they're going to be bought into the mission of the company and really be focused on how do we go and deliver results. And that's been a key area of focus at Stella and Chewy's for me. I'll be candid. When I got there, there was a lot of noise. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's coming out of the pandemic, a lot of companies, especially manufacturing, were challenged because of labor, high turnover rates, especially in the manufacturing area, and lots going on and lots of competition. And Stella and Chewy's was no different. And so when I got there, I found a group of people who were working exceptionally hard and almost surviving every day. My leadership team, I would look and they would be double booked all day long in meetings, getting 200 email messages a day and having long laundry list of things to get done. And if you can take a couple steps back rather than walking into, sometimes we get so consumed with the tactics, but when you're in the tactics, it's hard to see beyond the trees, and it's really hard to get anything done. And so I just started to point out the chaos, and then I saw my job was to go and remove a lot of the chaos. And it's simple things that are easy to say and hard to do, but it meant that I had to back off or change expectations as a leader. So, frankly, people have meetings all day long in their meetings, and then you got a pile of email that's backed up and people are frustrated because you're not getting back to, how are you ever going to make any progress or get anything done? And what can happen then is we end up saying, well, we don't have enough resources. We need more resources, hire more people. And that can be a downward spiral as well. So one of the things that I've learned over the years, and one of the rules that I have, is expect differently of people. One of the things as leaders is it's very hard to give up control and to push ownership further down in the organization, which is critical. And so what would happen and where you get so much of this noise is if leaders want all decision-making coming up through them. So for me, later in my career, I learned about the true meaning of pushing ownership further down in the organization through at Johnsonville. But when I came at Stella and Chewy's, I said, look, here's a couple of simple rules. You're not sending 2 or 3 people from a function or an area to a meeting. One person goes. So if you have to have a representative, and that means that you can't be offended that not everybody knows everything. And sometimes people say, well, it's further development. And you need, 3 or 4 people. And what if they hear this or that? And I'm like, we just don't have the time and the resources. And you're all complaining you have too much to do. So one of the things is everybody has to support each other. And only one person from a functional area goes to a meeting. That's it. And so what that also means is that person who is representing whatever area or function is responsible for representing the entire area or function. It means if they don't know the answer, they have to go and get the answer and follow up and represent their teammates. They have to go back and communicate to their teammates what's going on. And even if you're not 100%, accept that you're not going to be perfect. Because even if we're 80%, that becomes a multiplier. To use your point earlier, Jason, where all of a sudden more people can get more done because we're spreading that out and we're spreading out decision-making. The other thing we did is, like in our sales and operations plan, our S&OP process, most of the meetings, there's like meetings before the meetings and executive team were in all those meetings. Basically, we redid that whole process and we kicked out all the executives leading up to the executive review at the end of the month. And the S&OP is really about aligning on all of our future decisions. And in those meetings, the expectation was that the team brought forward what the situation was, what were the options or risks to the decisions, and what was their recommendation. And I would tell you probably 9 or 9.5 times out of 10, we accepted their recommendation. And that's what got approved, and that's what we moved on with. Otherwise, if you have the executives and you have all these different people, you're not really putting people responsible, and you waste all this time and energy in meetings. And then the other one we had at the time is we had an ops review. So kind of S&OP is forward looking. If you go and you look when I was coming in, we'd have an ops review, and there's frankly a lack of confidence in some of the things that were going on. And so it would be with the CEO and executive team, and the team would spend probably 50 man hours preparing for this monthly review to go through all the numbers and all the details and all, to really be accountable. And then they would go into this meeting. It was scheduled for 3 hours, and they get through half of the content, and there'd already be 50 follow-up items, from there. I said, and I told the CEO, I said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to narrow this down. I also told the team some of this stuff is not relevant. So the S&OP, that's where we talk about things for the future to drive alignment in the organization. And when we're talking about the business reviews, company reviews, that's where we're talking about our results and what are we doing to drive improvements in our results. And I said, you get only a couple of questions, to ask the team, and it's going to be an hour. And it made people very uncomfortable because they wanted to be able to get into the results and drive accountability. But frankly, they were wasting the limited resource time that we had. And today, that's really how we operate. And I'll tell you, it cleaned up so much noise in the organization. The other one is email. And we're still not great at email, but email just drives me crazy. It's used in communication platforms. Use the right tools to communicate. Email is not the right platform for having conversations. How many times do people reply and all of a sudden you have 10 different emails going in 3 different spurred conversations that are inefficient. Use a tool like Teams, use texting, whatever the group is. That's where you have a conversation. So you don't bury people in 100 email. And so, how do we start to minimize some of the email? Don't copy the world, only copy people who are relevant and make sure that you're clear in your title. There are actually protocols for how you can do a better job with email. We've tried to use some of those, but all of that, people think they're driving benefits, and especially as leaders, and all they are doing is wasting resource time. And if you can go and free people's time, then all of a sudden they tend to be much more productive and much more energized about what they're doing. And then if that can start to turn into winning in your results, then you have a formula for great success.
Dave, there's so much there that I'd love to unpack. The piece that really resonates with me is, we talk so much about we want to create innovating cultures, that we want everyone in an organization to think innovatively. We want them to have the margin to think and zoom out from just the everyday nuts and bolts of what they do and think strategically. But to do that, you have to free up that time a lot of times, right? That you're talking about, that you have to build in the productivities and efficiencies to give them margin in that work schedule many times, so that they aren't just a hamster on a wheel, just plugging away, participating in meetings that are just taking up time, but really aren't productive. Like, you got to fine tune that stuff to make sure that there's space and time for everyone in the organization to think around, how could this be better? How could my role, how could the things that I'm doing be done in a better way to advance what we're doing? And I've seen this so many times in organizations that I've worked alongside, is most folks say, I don't have the time to be able to think like that because I'm just trying to keep up with existing processes. And it sounds like you've got something in place here that's helping folks move past that and start to think innovatively.
Make no mistake, I'm not a perfect leader, and Stella and Chewy's is not a perfect place, but we strive to realize our potential every day and to get better and create an environment where people can realize their full potential. That's really our ambition. But I'm learning every day in what I do. What I would say is it's interesting, kind of on your points around making time for people. What I've come to believe over time, or at least how I think, is it's never intention that's a problem. People can make great arguments for good reasons to do things and the intention and that kind of stuff. What gets missed is the practicality of how realistic it is. I'll tell you, like, for example, early in my career, I used to be really outspoken and very critical. Like, we don't have great strategic planning in our plan. And the problem is our strategic planning. We don't communicate effectively top to bottom. And if everybody's aligned, if we spent more time making sure that everybody understood the company, blah, 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 that would be my arguments. That'd be my critique of the senior leaders. Today, I'm probably more in the minority. I despise like 3 days of offsite strategic planning for the next year and that kind of stuff. In some ways, you need to make it practical and give a framework. And how often have we all sat in meetings for days on end and we've come up with this big strategic plan and that kind of stuff, and then is barely referenced and it's stale after a quarter. Nobody's really using it, but you have a nice document that looks, pretty and all that kind of stuff. I think it needs to be less perfect. And I think it needs to be general framework of the critical things for your business that you need to go and drive. And the more you can drive clarity to that, and then don't relieve people of their responsibility along the way for understanding their role. So oftentimes people want to be hand-fed in communication and hand-fed exactly what to do. And part of my response is, how do you play into this? So here's our strategic goal might be that we need to grow in a different channel, a market channel, or we need to do something. So what can you do with that? Well, I don't know. I'm not in sales. Well, how do you help to develop new products? How do you help to support them? What are we doing to, relieve some of the complexity so that we can be faster if you're on an ops side or on the procurement side or different? And yes, something might be a pain in the butt from your perspective and the work that you do, but maybe it's going to help us in that channel, which is really important from a strategic standpoint. What do you do? So how do we get people to think differently? Or another one would be, a complaint that you'll always hear is the easiest thing in anybody in any company complain about. Well, communication sucks. We're not very good. And I didn't hear about this. Nobody told me. And, leaders oftentimes will enable that and will say, yeah, you're right. obviously everybody can do better at communication. But mine is, are you sitting at your desk or your, in your office and waiting for somebody to spoon feed you? Or are you going out and trying to seek the information? Who is limiting information from you? And if they're limiting information and not willing to share, well, that's one thing. If you're waiting for it to be spoon fed and you're not, and it's not being spoon fed in a way that you're digesting it and you're not taking any personal accountability to understanding and helping other people understand, well, that's on you. And you need to take some responsibility in that piece versus waiting for it just to come and be spoon fed to you. And I can't tell you how many times people say, well, nobody communicated to me. And then there was emails or something else. And either people got communicated or it's like they're so buried in their email, they never got to it. So people spent all this time and it just wasn't very effective. So be careful about some of those things. And part of it is, how do you work to make sure that you understand what you need to? And there are certain things that are outside of your scope and realm of responsibility. Why are you wasting your time and energy? Focus your time and energy. We all are limited in that on what you can control and influence. If you don't have control and influence, then don't waste your time. That's all negative energy that's usually generated around the water cooler with rumors or frustrations or enabling other people. And that's stuff that just creates waste. And as leaders, the more you can disable that stuff from going on, the better off your organization is.
Again, there's so much good stuff there. Dave, I can't help but think that your let's figure this out type attitude, or I'm going to figure it out, probably some of that, if I'm guessing, came from, you talked about early on in your history with school, with dyslexia that made reading, a little bit more challenging then, and had to overcome those obstacles. And I can't help but imagine that to a certain extent influenced, who you are today in terms of your character of, let's figure it out. We don't have to have all the answers, but let's dig in and figure out how we're going to solve this. And to that end, Dave, at the very beginning, you heard me talking about just a couple interesting predictions from the 1960s in regard to what the future of work they were thinking back then was going to look like around 2000, around time and around money. It's Stella and Chewy's. How are you and your teams thinking about the future of work? Are these things that are becoming part of your SOP process or questions in terms of looking forward? What's that kind of look like right now for you?
What I tend to do, what I try to lead through is look at what your problems are instead of trying to worry about what 20 years from now might be, especially if you're a growing company. If you're a really stable company, you're fed up, there are different maturity cycles. If you're a 50-year-old company, it's a whole lot different than if you're a 3-year-old company or a 5-year-old company or even a 20-year company, where you are in your life cycle. But if you're a growing company, you're really trying to get process and stable and that kind of stuff. And for me, even in any company, you already know the problems and the opportunities that you have in front of you. And the question is not, what do I need to do? If I ever run out of things to do, then I know who to go find. I know the people who can go and help me. But usually that list is long that I already know where the problems to solve, or the team already knows the problems to solve. So then the question is, what are the opportunities out there, the applications, the best use case, and that you can learn from other people on what they're doing so that you can address what those needs are. And the one that doesn't change and hasn't changed ever is people. How do you engage people? How do you make people feel valued? How do you help them to feel connected to their work? How do you communicate better? All of those kind of things. I'll tell you my prediction, 100 years from now, that's still going to be a challenge, no matter what your society is and what the work looks like and the things that we're doing. It was a problem 100 years ago, 50 years ago. It's a problem today or an opportunity, and it will be an opportunity going forward, no matter what. And those are some of the things, like, for example, that we're working on. That's where there's some really cool stuff that we're doing at work right now.
Yeah. And I remember in a previous conversation we had, Dave, you don't have to give away all the trade secrets, but you're sharing how there's a new AI tool, hardware and software device that helps with communication inside the company. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, this is one. I'll give away all the trade secrets on this one because, frankly, we're a customer, but they're a great partner, and that's Weavix. So, in my opinion, there's been a big unmet need in manufacturing, especially anybody who's has manufacturing operations, those kind of things, where you have frontline members, partners, employees, however you want to reference them. We reference all our employees as members. They're all members of our pack. We're we have a good themes to stick with what we do. Like I love like the marketing team years ago before, I don't get any credit for this, but they put our values to kind of match with our brand. And so it's be good, be a good person and that kind of stuff. But like against the dog themes, it's bark up, bark often. All breeds are welcome, we're truly in a diverse environment, especially what I'm proud of in our manufacturing environment. But we want everybody to feel that welcome, no matter what their background, their ethnicity, their religious, beliefs or anything. For us, our members, how do you communicate? And it really, when I was at Johnsonville, I saw it, and even at Schreiber, but especially during the pandemic, I see this big gap in manufacturing because the labor force was challenged. It was hard to find good people. And then there's more diversity coming into the labor force. And not everybody spoke English. And how do you create an environment where you can allow for translation? And nobody's really figured that out very well. I had thought for a long time that there was an opportunity there. And so I started doing a lot of research because it was an unmet need. So along those ways. And I actually was advocating that we could potentially develop something with our parent company, Stripes. And so Stripes actually put their research team into it, and they found Weavix, who was just starting to launch. And they had done way more than I even expected or what I had planned in kind of my simple thinking. And Weavix has done a great job. Kevin Turpin and his team if you could go and invest dollars, is where I'd invest dollars. They've developed a smart radio, basically. And so it's basically, think about a smaller size Motorola with the touchscreen, front-facing, back-facing camera, geofence, LTE, Wi-Fi capable, and really set up to work in any environment and made to be commercially strong, whether around water or chemicals or anything like that. And then you can also, the same tool is available in communication if I want to use an app on my phone or if I want to use the console on my computer, and they have integration coming out with Teams. So anyhow, we became an early adopter of that. But what was very different and where we worked so well with Weavix and why they've been such a great partner and why they've supported us so much is we took a very different approach. And this is where believing in people is one thing. If you just want to replace your existing technology, fine, you can do that and you're going to save money. We took a different approach. Instead of just replacing our existing radios, we went and we said, we're going to do this differently. We gave it to every member in our manufacturing environment. So we gave it to, 650 members between all the different shifts and 24, 7 days a week in our operations and that kind of stuff. And basically what these smart radios do, and it's been amazing to see the adoption, and it's only getting better. So these smart radios go and transcribe your conversation. So as we're talking, it is transcribing what I'm saying. So if I was in a meeting, I can read it. But with that transcription, what it also means is it can translate to any language. And so actually you could be speaking Spanish or Albanian, and I could be speaking English. You have your radio set up that way. It'll transcribe it into your language, and it'll speak back into your language what I just said. So it'll say, Dave Kapic just said XYZ. And then you can speak in your language and come back to me, and everybody can have it in any language they want. And these radios are agnostic. So on the back of everybody's badge, they just have a sticker, an NFT sticker. And so they put it on the back of the radio, put in their birthday, and then they're logged into the radio. And they're done. They just put it in the charger when they're going on break at the end of the day, and it automatically logs them out. And it has worked fantastic. The other thing is, instead of treating people, this is what normally happens. You go and you limit capabilities of your technology because you're worried about what people will do. Guess what? We did a lot on our onboarding when we rolled this out. We did not turn off the cameras. That made some people in HR, that made some people on the legal side really worried about having cameras and everybody's and people doing the wrong thing. When we rolled out on all the different shift meetings and what we communicated to people, I said, look, we're not turning it off. Everybody has the ability, but if you go and you take an inappropriate picture, it's out there and somebody reports it. If somebody goes in the bathroom, takes an inappropriate picture and sends it out, you will be terminated. Simple as that. And I expect everybody in this room who is going and benefiting from a new communication platform where you can actually talk to somebody who doesn't speak your language for the first time as a member, I expect you to hold everybody accountable. And guess what? We had one person the first weekend get terminated, not for a picture, but for being inappropriate on the radio. And we haven't had a problem since. We also, the radios, and we're barely kind of using this capability, but they also have geo tracking on them. So what we've said is we're not sitting there with somebody tracking everybody's individual movement all the time, just like we have cameras in our facility. So if we have a safety or quality incident, that's where we use it for investigation. And we tell people it is there. So can it track you? Yes. But here's why I need it to track you. Because first and foremost, it's for safety. Because when you go and if we have an incident, we have an ammonia leak, or God forbid anything happens, and we move everybody out, if they have their Weavix, we know exactly who's out. And if somebody is left behind, we can send first responders to exactly where they are to go and help that person who might be left behind in a dangerous situation. They also have a man down device on it. So you hold the button and it'll say 3, 2, 1 really loud because you don't want to have somebody accidentally hitting it. You keep holding that, it sends off alarms, sends all the first responders and everybody in an area, and they'll go right to the person who's in need. So it's got some great safety features in there as well. What it also means we can do over time, and this is what we're not doing, but as part of the capability that's built into there with the geo-tracking capability is we can do things like if you've ever been in manufacturing, you have meetings and shift meetings or town hall meetings, and you bring people in, you got everybody signing off for attendance. And you waste 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the start of that meeting just getting everybody signed off and tracking who's there for attendance or whatever. Well, here, we can actually just use a Weavix, just wear your radio. And when you're there, then all of a sudden we know everybody who's in the meeting and there's no time that's wasted doing that. The other thing we can do is instead of having like one of the things in manufacturing is you're trying to figure out your cost and where people are working. And oftentimes you might have some that's a pain in the butt and it's never quite accurate around having people clock in and out depending on where they work and the function, that kind of stuff. Again, what we could do is you can simply now go and take how many work hours of all the work hours are spent in this area, how many work hours are spent in this area or doing this certain set of jobs. And now I can get my costing for the different products or activities much closer. Again, we don't want people worried that we're sitting there going over the top and trying to track Jason onto everything that that's not really the purpose at all. If you're really trying to cause a problem, you want to go out to your car and sleep all night long, well, that might show up because you're going to cause people to be looking for you and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, we're not doing any of that kind of stuff because we want to help people to do the right thing, not catch people doing the wrong thing, but we'll use it to drive accountability. But here's all of that said, and we're barely getting into what's even some of the cooler stuff. What's so exciting about this technology is I've been a part of many rollouts, and it's usually a big push versus a pull, very hard to get adoption and all that kind of stuff. In the first 3 weeks of using this system, how many individual messages do you think were sent out? Because people can send a one-on-one, or you can think about it like text groups. They can go in different work areas, and we have different groups set up it's always an art of not getting too much noise in messaging, but making sure that the right people are getting the right messages, that kind of stuff. But in the first 3 weeks, say we average 550 people a day, because we go 7 days a week and that kind of stuff. What would be your guess of how many messages might have been sent out in the first 3 weeks?
Let's say each person was doing one message.
Yep. One message a day. So 550 a day. So you're at, 3,500 a week and that kind of stuff. So yours will be around 20, 30,000 messages. We are at over 200,000 messages.
Wow.
Over 200, I think it might have been 260,000 messages in the first 3 weeks. And so with that said, and then we were at like an 80+% utilization, meaning every person who had a radio and logged in sent at least a message, during that time. And then you have things like cameras that are on there where people can go and send so maintenance has to come out and they have the right part of what's going on, but they can send a video of what they see directly to maintenance, and maintenance might coach them on what to do, or, hey, what blade do I need if I'm changing a cutter, a tape cutter or something like that. And we might have, if we're not standardized and I have 3 different blades that might be used depending on the cutter, they can make sure that they're clear on exactly which one. So maintenance isn't going back and forth and that kind of stuff. There's so many different uses that are on there, but the adoption has been fantastic. I don't think I could take it away at this point, but here's what's really exciting. So we've been the early adopter and we're doing it differently again. And this is what I'd encourage leaders. If you truly believe in culture and you really want to make a difference, go and put this in the hands of everybody, and now go and change what you do. Because here's what we're going to do now in our next step. One of the suggestions that we had for Weavix in an early conversation with their executive team, and I'm so impressed with them because they got this done already. And I've already developed this into the app, and we're going to get to use it here. We're going to be the first ones to use it in the next couple of weeks to test it for them. But was music, so when I go in different environments and different plants. So if I went to, when I was with Johnsonville, and I would go out to our Watertown plant, depending on the day of the week in the area, but they might be blasting one radio, and Monday might be country, and Tuesday was Latina, and Wednesday was hard rock, and, kind of a big debate and you couldn't hear. And then other areas nobody has music and that kind of stuff. Well, they've built in and just worked out a deal with iHeartRadio. And so you're going to be able to listen to music while you work. And the cool thing is we can administer. And so it's, I forget what it's Safety Smart, or it's, they have a terminology for it, but basically we can control how loud, so we can monitor how loud it is and limit how loud the music is. And then if there's messages that come through, it automatically will silence the radio. So the music during that time, where people today in my environment don't have music to listen to, or podcast, but they can listen to music, podcasts, whatever it might be. They can listen to, potentially stations in there. So for here in Wisconsin, what iHeart does is I think it works off of the zip code. So they can listen to Brewers games, or they can listen to Packers games if they're having to work during the game, of that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about what that means for people. But if somebody calls them, or if there's an emergency, it cuts out the radio. You can also go and have in certain areas where it automatically cuts out the music. So you walk into a geofenced area that's a silent area because of a lot of forklift traffic or some other thing, and it'll cut it off. So now what that does is now you have people wanting to wear a headset, wanting to have because all of a sudden their radio, now they're fully connected because of the benefit to them. So again, you get the pull. Now here's what I'm going to start to expect, and what we're going to do a better job on going forward. One of the things is you can have a great tool and platform, but how often do you go and roll that stuff out, and then we really don't take full advantage of it? You don't really take advantage to communicate. So as leaders, there's a bigger responsibility on you to also change your behaviors to get the most out of that new tool. So like, for example, for me, and I can do a better job and set a better example, but what's really cool is for the first time ever, I can send a message right now as we're in the middle of this podcast. I can send it so it goes to every PAC member, and they all get the same thing. Like, I've sent messages saying, hey, we got a bunch of dignitaries coming through, just make them feel welcome. And afterwards, I'm just like taking 5 minutes before the meeting, just sending a message right from my phone and saying, hey, I just want to thank everybody. I was very proud of walking them through our house and being able to show off. You guys did a great job. Thank you. Proud of what you do every day. And it could just be a very authentic message. And then Michael Carter, our vice president of manufacturing, starting to send out messages that say, here's what we did for our week performance. And then we're going to start to do it by department. But what we're also going to do is this. Again, we don't want to use it for discipline, but we want to use it for coaching. So when you're running a 24-hour day shift operation, one of the things that's a challenge is, how do you coach the back shift supervisors, leaders who might be there and don't get the same level of attention? And how do you make sure the same message goes out to all your different PAC members on all the different shifts? So we have shift huddles, shift meetings every day. Well, now the expectation is going to be with the headsets and the music. And what we can do is now start to use the Weavix as you do your huddle meetings, because they might just be talking to the group today. But if I have 5 different people in the group who in my huddle, where English might not be my primary language, how much am I potentially missing? But if everybody's wearing their Weavix, and I start to use the Weavix to actually communicate the town hall, and I cover all my different pieces, everybody's hearing in their primary language. And so as a leader, I might need to slow down a little bit and get really good at being clear with my pronunciation. And I always say that even if it only translates at 80% accuracy, and oftentimes is much better than that. Some people don't do a good job, and it might be a little bit lower. But even if I'm only moderately good at in how it goes and it translates, it's exponentially better than what we had before, where we had nothing. But here's the deal. If we start using the Weavix, and on the back shifts, they're going and they're using that to communicate in their huddles, eventually, as a cost savings, there's no reason you couldn't do that while people are doing their work, so they can actually be on the line. And now you're not paying 15 minutes overtime, and you're actually doing a better job communicating to people. We're not going to do that right away, but there's no reason we can't go and help to pay for the radios by saving time and getting some productivity that way. But number 2 is, now I can go, or the leaders in the different functions, maybe the packaging leader can go and audit some of the back shift meetings and not use it to but to use it to coach up the supervisor and say, hey, you didn't really explain the why behind why this safety incident was so important and why they should do it differently versus just explaining what happened. And so, you can go and use it to help to see, number one, are they coaching? Are they sharing the information as you expected? How diluted does that information get? How do you coach up those leaders who might be using the tool? If, as a leader, you take ownership for actually thinking about how do you apply the technology differently. So I can obviously go on. I'm pretty passionate about it. I can go on for a long time and talk about the benefits, but it's really exciting stuff to me.
Well, I was just going to say, Dave, there's so much good stuff there. The pieces that really resonated with me were around how are you using the technology? It's one thing to go out and purchase a piece of technology, maybe use it in one use case, but you're using it to remove language barriers across your department so people are able to communicate better. You brought in some Pygmalion effect in the psychology world, which is most people, they're not going to rise to low expectations. So you set a good expectation of we're going to trust everybody to do this. And if you don't, then there's a consequence and you only had that one infraction. And so you trusted your people to be able to do it. You're using it to be able to help with safety procedures. You're using it for coaching. And I think that's the piece I really want leaders to take away from this conversation. There's a lot I want them to take away, but just going out and looking for a new software solution isn't the thing. I love the term you used, Dave. You said, understand your unmet needs. That's where you have to get clear. And then you go through that procurement process of, okay, what are the options out there of something that can help us get over this? Maybe it's an existing tool we already have, or maybe we need to get a new one. But I love the thoughtfulness behind the innovation and adoption and hearing the success story of how in an organization your size that you were able to bring in a brand new revolutionary technology and get adoption rates where you're getting six-figure number of messages that are going out in the first few weeks because people are actually using it, that they're up to speed. They understand how to use it. They see the value in using it. They know that it's improving their employee experience, their work experience at Stella and Chewy's. That is commendable. And I hope that's one of the big pieces that the listeners take away today. And I want you to follow up on that really quickly. And then we're going to move into our last segment together, which is going to be the 3 parts of the mind segment to get to know you a little bit more. But I know you got a little bit more, it looks like you want to share on that.
One of the other things that goes with that too is partnership. So with a supplier or vendor, and if you find, I always think you got to give to get, and it's built off of trust. And with Weavix, and part of where it's been so fun and working with that team is there's deep trust. They are actually viewed as part of our team. Our PAC members like seeing anybody from Weavix when they come in. I actually have a couple of people in Weavix, and we didn't take back their badges because I trust them. We track with somebody if they sign in and stuff like that. But guess what? They know our PPEs. They know all of our requirements for our personal protective for going out on the floor. And they've been nothing but helpful in helping to support us. And they're a part of our team. That's how we treat them. And so then they're very vested in helping us. And that's where then as an early adopter, our job is to help them to be better and to provide feedback. And are there things that they've had to learn along the way? Sure. But it also means that we get to be the first to go and try new things. And actually, because of that, they are tailoring their solution around us, which then gets rolled out to others. And so it's super fun and exciting. And our team, there's mutual benefit, but it's just one that too often we treat suppliers or those who might be coming in. And I think it's more of there's a lack of trust on both sides. And I think that really limits you. And if you can get to the other side of that and truly partner with people with true mutual benefit as your interest, great things can happen, a lot of magic. And I would consider many of the people at Weavix, from Kevin, who's a CEO, to, Ethan, who does our videography and has helped us out with a whole bunch of stuff and super creative, to Brandon and their developers and Ben. They're friends now. They're part of the family and always welcome. So I just want to say that too often as leaders, it's kind of like, what's in it for me? And it's a one-way street. Where here, we're going to work to help them to be successful, and then they're turning around and being equally vested in our success.
Well, in every business, you're in business to do your business. You can't be an expert in everything. And so you got to find the right vendors and partners that help fill in those gaps and supplement and complement the things that you need. in order to advance that vision. And you found an incredible partner that's become part of what I love you call it, the Pack family, which is part of the branding there at Stella and Chewy's. So Dave, I can't believe that we're already about 45, 50 minutes in here. We are going to roll now into our segment to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level and help the listeners do the same. We call this our 3 parts of the mind segment. Here's why we call it that. All human beings have 3 different parts of their mind, of who they are. There's the cognitive part. Cognitive, just like it sounds, is the way that we think. So this is kind of our skills, our aptitudes, strengths. Those are some of the terms that are often used around cognitive and thinking. The second part of the mind is affective. So I'm going to ask you an affective question that has a little bit more to do with preferences, personality, values, those kind of pieces of who you are. And then the third question I'm going to ask you is the one that might be the most unique, and it's a part of the mind that we often don't talk about, but this is the conative part of who we are. The conative part of who we are is our instincts, how we naturally take action. And so I'm going to ask you some questions around that to kind of get at maybe your conative profile a little bit. So 3 questions coming your way. First one here, we're going to start with the cognitive question. What is maybe a hidden talent or skill that you have, Dave, that maybe most people wouldn't guess?
It goes back to maybe the dyslexia and there's some great books I've read, and dyslexics oftentimes are very good at kind of having the mind's eye view, where you can kind of be over the top and you can see things. And if I think a skill I developed over the years is being able to put myself in the shoes of somebody else so that I can really kind of think through and understand their perspective. The danger is you have to always be careful, because if you think and you really are off, it can come across as arrogant, condescending, and those kind of things. So you always want to proceed with some caution, but generally speaking, I think I have a pretty good perspective of how somebody else might be feeling, how they might look at the world. And if you're only looking from your ability to influence somebody else is very small. But if you can articulate and you can have somebody to understand, you actually have a pretty good perspective of how they might be thinking and what might be frustrating or what might be energizing to them or whatever that perspective is. You oftentimes will surprise them, maybe shock them, and all of a sudden the ears get really open. And the more you can do that on a consistent basis, all of a sudden your credibility goes up, that you actually might know a little bit about what you're trying to talk to them about, what you're trying to coach them in. And then some really great things can happen.
No doubt that is a superpower that you have, and I love that. That's a really important cognitive skill there. Dave, let's switch over to affective now. So this one's going to be a little bit more kind of a gut, visceral reaction in terms of things that you like. So what's a favorite of yours? Could be a book, could be food, could be a movie, could be like a vacation spot or a hobby. What's a favorite of yours?
So I have so many. I think I will never have a problem retiring because I won't be bored. But I'll tell you one that, I'll give you one that is a favorite thing to do of mine. And it's where I kind of get that zen or that relaxation that a lot of people might not know about. And that's, I actually live a bit north of here and am blessed to live on Lake Michigan. And when it gets dark, I actually go hunting for what's called Uperlights. And if you've never looked up a Uperlight and you don't know what that is, which many people don't know, is Yooperlite, all one word. And there's a great story. It was found by Eric, a guy up in Michigan who used to hunt special rocks. And it's actually really interesting. These were only found like in 2017, 2019, not too long ago. But basically there's certain UV lights, with a N365. And if you take the right light out at night along Lake Michigan, there are these rocks that will glow that look like just regular rocks. And they people call them dragon eggs and that kind of, they're the coolest things ever. And it's almost like somebody who told me about it when I first moved onto the lakeshore and I was at Johnsonville, they go, the first time you find one, you're going to be like a little kid. I'm telling you, it's the coolest thing ever. And they were right. And I was texting them pictures. And so it's a great joy for me to be able to walk the lakeshore at night when it's quiet and just walk by myself and find Uperlights and just enjoy the peace and serenity of the lakeshore. It's one of the coolest things ever.
That is so cool. I love it. That's got me starting to think a little Game of Thrones. I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones or not, but you've been talking about dragon eggs. Sign me up. I think I'm going to have to do that and maybe make a trip up there to Lake Michigan and check that out. I love it. Final question, third one. This is the one that has to do with kind of like your natural instincts, the way that you're wired and doing things. What's your way of taking action on things, personal or professional? How do you jump in and start on something? Do you tend to jump in head first? Do you like to kind of gather a lot of facts to begin with? What's kind of your process of actually doing things the Dave Kapic way?
No, I think it kind of depends on what the situation is. And so are you coming into a stable environment where people know you and you have trust and you have confidence? Or is it something where nobody knows who you are and what you're trying to get done and those kind of things? So if I'm coming into like at Stella and Chewy's, and people don't know me, I'm trying to earn trust and confidence, that's what I'm going to do, because when I have that, we can go further and faster. If I already have trust and confidence, then I'm trying to leverage people and to get their ideas moving forward. And so my job is really to remove barriers and not to be the smartest person in the room, but to help other people to shine their light and to put them in a position. And I might nudge things, but I also try to be selfless, allow other people to kind of own it and to be able to push things forward. And so there are some things I like to be creative on. There are some things that I might have a lot of passion behind, and I'll qualify and say, look, this is something I'm really passionate about. I want to really push forward. So for example, take the Weebix radios. I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew the benefit it would bring, and I knew the ownership that we would take. And so I actually took that project and led it. And I asked for a couple of young leaders with high potential who helped and really kind of did the prep work. So it was fun for them to work with me, a chance for me to help to coach them, and a chance for them to shine. And so in that case, I really was a driving force behind it because I really wanted to get out there, and it earned a lot of credibility. But I'll give you like a real quick story of what was one of the embarrassing, but also a great joy for me as well. So when we were doing the rollout meetings, we're explaining expectations and rolling out and doing the training on the radios, like I mentioned, that kind of stuff. So I think we had like 14 shift meetings, and it's, going from 5 o'clock in the morning until midnight or later, throughout the week. And I overslept, forgot to set my alarm when I came back, and I hadn't done that in years. And I woke up literally like 10 minutes before the start of one of these meetings, and I was like 25 minutes away. So it's physically impossible for me to be there in time. And I called my assistant who had been a part of it, and Sean Keel, who was a safety manager at the time, but really was a cornerstone, has become a big piece of this project. And Sean was, a little bit more reserved, and, part of the process, we were really building his confidence to his capabilities. And when I called Jill, literally right before the presentation, and they'd heard me give it so many times, her answer was, no problem, we got it. And she and Sean did my presentation and part of it. Now, I broke all the speed laws, and I got there in like 25 minutes, skipped the shower that morning, that kind of stuff. So I was there for the second half. But they did a fantastic job. And to have them fill in and not panic and not have anybody even notice that I wasn't there and that kind of stuff, while embarrassed that I was late for something that I thought was so important, it was also very rewarding to see what they had done and to see them just crush it.
I love it. I love it. So there we go. 3 parts of the mind, 3 parts, levels of Dave Kapic that we wanted to get to know better. And so now our listeners have that too. So Dave, we're going to go ahead and wrap up now as we get ready to leave. I'm sure a lot of folks, they're wanting to learn more about Stella and Chewy's, the work that you're doing, some of the innovative things. How can they stay in touch, and how could they learn more about Stella and Chewy's, the company?
Well, I will give you a link to, I'll give you, Jason, and you can post my work email, and, people are welcome. You can also find us at Stella and Chewy's online, and find a lot about our products, and we're sold through all the major pet channels.
Perfect. Dave, thank you so much for being our honored guest today and teaching us so much about what innovation in the future of work are looking like.
Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Now it's up to you. See you next time.